On the eve of battle, the air was thick with tension. The Prophet Muhammad addressed his followers, his voice calm yet powerful. "Tomorrow we fight not for power or glory, but for our right to believe and to live in peace. Trust in Allah, for He is our protector." His words ignited a fire within the hearts of his companions, reminding them of their purpose. In the year 624, the sun hung high over the arid landscape of Badr, a small oasis in the heart of the Arabian Peninsula. The nascent Muslim community in Medina faced immense challenges. After fleeing persecution in Mecca, Prophet Muhammad and his followers had established a new home. But tensions with the Quraysh, the powerful tribe that controlled Mecca, were escalating. The Quraysh tribe of Mecca was led by the fierce Abu Jahl, determined to crush the rising influence of the Muslims. Opposing Abu's forces was a smaller force of believers, led by the Prophet Muhammad himself, a man whose resolve was as unyielding as the desert stones beneath their feet. With a small force of roughly 300 loyal Muslim warriors, Muhammad opted to meet the Quraysh in the battlefield, to prove his faith before all of Islam's followers. The two forces met near the wells of Badr, about 80 miles southwest of Medina. The Quraysh army numbered approximately 1,000 men, well equipped and led by experienced commanders. In contrast, they vastly outnumbered their Muslim foes by more than 3 to 1, and the Muslims were less well armed and armored, with only a handful of cavalry. The Muslims, although vastly outnumbered, had the advantage of positioning themselves near the wells of Badr, giving them access to water, a critical resource in the harsh desert landscape. On top of that, they had sabotaged nearby wells during the night that would have been used to resupply the Meccan army. In the hot desert terrain, this was a critical blow to the Quraysh of Mecca, and forced their hand to form up and give battle. The Quraysh commander Amr ibn Hisham, also known among Muslims as Abu Jahl, was overly confident in his force's chances of victory. He marched his Meccan force head-on towards Muhammad's force. Muhammad, a clever commander, had used the battlefield terrain to favor his numerically inferior force. He stationed his men in between a sloped and hilled terrain that was protected on both sides by sand dunes. As the battle was about to commence, the Muslims formed ranks and prepared to face the larger Quraysh force. Right before the battle, Muhammad prayed for victory, emphasizing the stakes involved, not only for the survival of the Muslim community, but for the broader message of Islam. Before the forces would engage, though, out came a Quraysh warrior by the name Al-Aswad bin Abdul Asad al-Makhzumi, swearing that he would drink from the well of the Muslims, or otherwise destroy it, or even die for it. In response to his cries, Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, one of Muhammad's uncles, stepped out from the Muslim ranks and met Al-Aswad on the battlefield. They began fighting in a vicious duel. The clash of steel swords rang out on the battlefield, though Hamza had gotten the better of Aswad. He struck Al-Aswad's leg before dealing him another blow that killed him. Seeing this, 3 men protected by armor and shields, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, alongside his brother, Shaybah ibn Rabi'ah, and son, Al-Walid ibn Utbah, emerged from the Meccan ranks. 3 of the Madani Ansar emerged from the Muslim ranks, only to be shouted back by the Meccans, who were nervous about starting any unnecessary feuds and only wanted to fight the Muhajirun, keeping the dispute within the tribe. So Hamza approached and called on Ubaidah ibn al-Harith and Ali ibn Abu Talib to aid him in the fight. The first 2 duels between Ali and Al-Walid and Hamza and Shaybah were quick, with both managing to kill their opponents swiftly. After the fight between Ali and Walid, Hamza looked at Ubaidah to find him seriously wounded. He then fell upon and killed Shaybah. Ali and Hamza then carried Ubaidah back into the Muslim lines, in which he succumbed to his wounds and died. The Meccans now took the offensive and charged upon the Muslim lines.
Annoy
The two forces clashed head-on, shields clattering, with a roar of metal and war cries heard throughout the air. The first Meccan charge was the fiercest. Quraysh cavalry attempted to break through and flank the Muslims, while Muhammad, stationed at the center, found himself heavily outnumbered and slowly losing ground. Fighting fiercely enough, the Muslim center managed to hold firm, absorbing the initial shock of the Quraysh charge. Muhammad then sent reinforcements to the flanks to prevent being outmaneuvered. Exhaustion began to set in on the men of both sides. Amr ibn Hisham ordered his Meccan soldiers to disengage and pull back. The Muslims had successfully thwarted the first Quraysh attack. However, it was not to last long, as the Quraysh soldiers had gathered their breath, reorganized and regained their cohesion, then charged once again towards the Muslim lines. Again and again, the Meccan Quraysh soldiers withdrew, regained their cohesion and charged against the wall of Muslim shields. Despite their numerical disadvantage, the Muslims' tactics and unity began to turn the tide. Reports from the battlefield describe a sense of divine assistance felt by the Muslims, with many believing that God himself watched over them on the battlefield. Inspired by their faith and unity, the Muslims continued pushing forward, rallying around their leader, Muhammad. Sensing a great opportunity, Muhammad quickly rallied his men and ordered them to charge toward the enemy. The Quraysh, once so sure of their victory, began to falter, their ranks breaking under the weight of their opponent's conviction. They eventually broke out into a mass retreat. The battle concluded with a decisive victory for the Muslims. Around 70 Quraysh fighters were killed, including several prominent leaders, while the Muslims suffered approximately 14 casualties. The aftermath of Badr had profound implications for both the Muslims and the Quraysh. The victory established the Muslims as a formidable force in the Arabian Peninsula and strengthened Muhammad's leadership. It bolstered the morale of the Muslim community, attracting more followers and consolidating their position in Medina. In the aftermath, the Quraysh sought revenge, leading to further conflicts and a deepening of hostilities between the two groups. The victory at Badr was also interpreted as a sign of divine support for the Muslims, reinforcing their faith and commitment. The Battle of Badr remains a central event in Islamic history. It is commemorated for its significance in demonstrating the resolve of the early Muslims and their commitment to their faith. The victory not only solidified Muhammad's role as a leader, but also laid the groundwork for the subsequent expansion of Islam throughout the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. The lessons learned in Badr would influence the Muslim community's strategies and resolve in the years to come, shaping the course of Islamic history.